Getting married in your 50s or remarried often means combining lives, but maybe not combining assets. So let's talk about love, marriage, and money the second or third time around here this week on the podcast. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome to Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. It's Phil Putney and myself here to talk investing, finance, and retirement. And Phil, maybe things didn't work out and you're getting married later in life for a second time or third time, or maybe it took you a long time to find the right person. Maybe you're getting married the first time a little later in life. So we want to talk about this a little bit on this episode and answer a listener question that came in, right? And just kind of tackle some of those pieces that you think might be important to break down for folks that might be in this situation. So let me read you the question here and we'll roll from there. We'll throw this up on the screen for folks. Says, I'm about to get married. We are both in our 50s and it will be my second marriage and her third. I'd like to keep all of our assets separate so that we each have our own financial lives and don't have to fight about money. But how do we plan for retirement if we don't know what our total numbers look like? So I guess we got to start there, Phil. What's some ground rules, if you will, for people who are going into a new marriage later in life? They have things. Can it be combined while still being separate? Is that a thing?
It can. And so this is really where it comes down to having this discussion. And I would recommend having it even before you get married for the
or
whatever, or even getting married later in life, because unfortunately money is one of those discussions and things that leads to tension and turmoil in marriage more often.
It's usually the number one. Yeah.
So having the ground rules laid down or just an understanding of how this works up front. And from an advisor standpoint, it can be a little bit challenging if you want to keep things separate. But again, it's having that discussion to understand, well, yes, we want to, have our finances separate, but how do you're still living a combined life.
Right.
There's many ways to do that.
With the software, like with retirement planning software, you can put everybody's data in, even if they're not merged yet, right? To kind of get a total, picture of what it might look like.
And that's typically how we do it. Even if you want to keep things separate, we look at it as a married couple that's combining assets. Because at the end of the day, you're filing a joint tax return, presumably.
Gotcha.
So you're still living this joint married life. But if you still want to keep things separate to some extent, well, then that's important for us to know. And we can help kind of guide then, well, how does that work?
Okay.
And I understand the reason behind it. It makes sense. I mean, especially if this is like a second marriage, where you want to support your current spouse, the new spouse you're getting married to, if something would happen to you.
Yeah.
But you don't want then by default your assets to end up going to that person and then disinherit your kids.
Yeah, you're talking about a shared vision,
right?
But a joint retirement timeline kind of thing,
right? And usually, more often than not, that's the concern is that, hey, we're living our life jointly together today, and we're comfortable with that. But I just want to protect my portion of the assets in the event that something happens to me. I want to make sure my spouse is taken care of. But if there is money left over, well, I want to make sure that then that goes to my kids.
Yeah.
And not their kids, or maybe that's not the case. Maybe you're all in and saying, hey, this is, our families are blended together. So we're going to divide it equally at the end. There's no right or wrong answer in all of this. It's really having that discussion, which is the key.
Yeah.
You're having it up front to understand. So both of you, we talked emotions a couple of podcasts ago. I mean, this is a very emotional decision to be made, but you'd rather have that up front so that you've kind of worked through the ins and outs and the emotions in this. And it's important for me as an advisor then to understand that. So now we can look at, okay, well, now we understand what you're trying to do. How do we make that happen?
Well, and if you're talking about keeping separate accounts, Phil, I mean, like I've heard people talk about, okay, well, we're keeping our accounts separate, because we never fight over money, which is great, but we've opened a kind of a combined responsibilities account, right? The household responsibilities account. You could kind of do that as well, where each month you both kick in the same agreed upon amount, dollar amount, and then that, account is used to pay the mortgage or to pay utilities and, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways to approach it. That's one of them, where we still have a combined, like a joint checking account, and we're maintaining our account separate, but we just have money in whatever you've agreed on from your own individual accounts get deposited into that joint account to then satisfy, to your point, all the living expenses that you have as a married couple. The other way is to maybe, list out, well, here's the different expense items, and you're going to handle utilities and the insurance and mortgage, I'm going to handle whatever it is, right? At the end of the day, again, there's no right or wrong answer. The right answer is you've laid it out on the table, so to speak, and you've had that discussion and have come up with an agreement, the ground rules, so that everyone's on the same page and is comfortable with this is how we're going to do it.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of The Tax Smart Retiree right now.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Is the legacy planning portion, we've talked about a little bit of that, but does this make it a little bit more important to look at a trust potentially if you're talking about a second or a third marriage where you've got more moving parts and more different beneficiaries and things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. Because let's make it real simple. It's just an IRA, right? So if I had an IRA and I got remarried later in life and I named my new spouse as a beneficiary on that IRA. So if something happens to me, it goes to that spouse. And that's just how beneficiaries work, right? I have no way to control how that works. So if it's important to me to say, hey, I want to be able to support my spouse, but if at the end of the day there's money left, I don't want it to be theirs where they can now control who it goes to, counting that they're going to count my kids in.
Right.
From a previous marriage, whatever it is, then maybe it's more important or better strategically to use a trust where you would name a trust as beneficiary. Now in the trust, you can set up specific rules to say, hey, the trust is going to pay for living expenses for the spouse, and you can put limitations and whatever you want to think up, you can design it in a trust, but the trust is the one that controls the assets. So it's not just their money. Right? In a beneficiary, there's no way to attach strings, so to speak, or to put guidelines or rules around the money. I mean, you can have guidelines and agreements, but I mean, that's not legal. Right. You're gone, so it's their money at that point, and they can do what they want. So,
yeah, right, exactly.
Again, it's one of those things to understand each other. And hey, if it's really important for you to make sure that this happens, then probably the best way and the easiest way to prevent there from being hard feelings and turmoil amongst kids even later on, and maybe kids in a surviving spouse, is to set it up the way you want it up front, right? So that there's no guesswork and why he said he wanted this to happen or she said I knew, no, just lay the rules today, get him in writing, build it as part of your estate planning.
Because people will absolutely fight. People like to think that they won't when they're gone, but they will. So protect yourself, protect your families. And I would imagine, Phil, we often joke about putting on the counselor hat, the third party hat, right? That's where an advisor really can be beneficial too when you're talking about a later in life or second or third marriage. Because now you're just this neutral party. Now we have hopefully the wisdom of age. We're getting remarried at a later in life. We know maybe some mistakes that we made earlier, right? Hopefully that stuff factors in. But again, having that third party could become really helpful because there are these extenuating circumstances. There are kids and grandkids, in two different directions. So, and who knows, right? I mean, depending on, it could be a marriage that you do in your late 40s and maybe a new child does happen. It's possible, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it's all those different pieces that you might not have thought about as a couple that the advisor can help bring some light to.
I've seen this before. I've worked with this before.
Right.
Or whatever.
We've gone through this before, and here's something to consider. And
Yeah.
that's very, very often the case that comes up with, from a beneficiary standpoint, because they maybe haven't thought that all the way through.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, when you have this kind of a scenario, the most important piece is transparency, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want, the other party thinking, well, you don't need to know what I'm doing with my money. And, and I think he or she's doing this. And, that just creates all this turmoil. Have a plan up front, whatever that plan is, know the pros and cons. Probably the easiest one is just having that joint combined account where all the expenses get paid from. You still keep your assets somewhat separate, but you're both contributing to one account that you're spending from. And that way there is no, I don't know what he's spending or she's spending. But I mean, if you're more comfortable doing it the other way, where you each have your own bank accounts and you're running that way, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer.
Well, I think this person's question was, we don't know the total numbers. So I think my takeaway was to say, okay, if you have everything completely separate and you go sit before an advisor, they don't have to build his retirement plan and her retirement plan. You can still input the data, correct, to get a total number of what a joint retirement timeline might look like.
Yeah, and that's going to be the best option. I mean, you could do a his and a hers. I mean, that's twice the work. And is it
that's not tax efficient as much though,
well,
right?
It's potentially not tax efficient either. Yeah, because you're filing a joint tax return. So at the end of the day, it's coming together on a tax return.
Yeah, okay.
So taking it out separately, that way gets really messy. The better big picture way is for the advisor, for us to look at everything together.
Yeah.
Build the plan that way. But then when we get to the quote unquote implementation, well, how do we make this plan work? Now that can be done individually to some extent.
Gotcha.
And have discussion, and I mean, I have this with clients where, okay, we're planning on doing a Roth conversion and it's going to be X amount. Typically for a married couple, our approach is going to be, well, we're going to convert the IRA of the oldest spouse first because they're going to reach required minimum distribution age first. So we're going to get the best tax benefit by doing that. But in this kind of a scenario, it might not make sense, right? Because but I'm converting his IRA and that's a tax bill that we're paying jointly. So I'm paying for some of his conversion out of my money.
Yeah.
Okay. So either we, pay the taxes on that out of his money or her money, whoever's doing it, or we do conversions in both, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's look at the big picture, make a decision that way because that's how you're living your life and you're filing taxes.
Yeah.
But then the actual nitty gritty, the implementation, well, that you can split and kind of maneuver between the two different households.
So, a little easier. Yeah. So financial independence and emotional connections aren't necessarily opposites. We can certainly keep a separate accounts. My wife and I do that. But your retirement plan usually needs to be built, together because it's one retirement because there will no longer be separate checks and so on and so forth. Although I guess you could still have checks from accounts being distributed to different people. But it's just a matter of building a cohesive plan so that you have one vision for what it's going to look like. So, all right, well, good stuff. Again, if you're in this position and more people are all the time, definitely make sure you're talking with a financial professional who's worked with couples, later in life. Gray divorces are on the rise. It's anybody over 50. Then remarriages, making sure that they got the CPA side of things, which Phil has. They got the financial advisor side of things, right? So, talk with a state attorney, talk with I guess you also have a divorce attorney depending on the situation going into it, but definitely make sure you got a plan and a strategy in place so that you can be as transparent as possible. That makes things a lot easier. So with that said, thanks for hanging out. Subscribe to the podcast. That way you catch new episodes when they come out so we can talk about all this stuff that we have to deal with in life because life is always going to throw us curveballs, so you might as well be ready for it. So we'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Find us on Apple, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And if you need help, click on one of the links below to get in touch with Phil and get started today. And we'll see you next time.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.